welcome to another edition of Up and to the Right. So our first expert QA ever was Kevin McEwen, and he's back. I guess we can officially say you're like a friend of the pod now. I think that's what the kids say. So thanks for coming back, Kevin. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things we talked about last time. The theme of our original chat was about managing your revenue organization during the pandemic, some of the lessons learned in the first 6 months of this, because I think we talked in early September. So we're 9 months in now, so
yeah,
another quarter has passed. And so when we talked last time, you had mentioned that you were thinking about, kind of through the end of the year, the US team might be coming back at the beginning of the year. Your EMEA team was sort of looking like they might come back because things were calming down a little bit. What does that look like now? What are your time horizons these days?
yeah, for sure. So our European team actually went back in late fall, right after we spoke,
Okay.
on a optional basis. They had, the ability to go back in if they wanted. There was no requirement. But we had a lot of folks over there that were just tired of working from home and had, space constraints. And we got opened up, especially Paris, so are kind of going in a couple of days a week. And then, unfortunately, as you know, the spike came back around. So as a result of that. And things are starting to clear a little bit now. There's some talk about potentially opening back up in early January on an optional basis. US side, we've pushed to end of April, I believe, is the current time frame, or to an April decision day, I should say, for reevaluating opening in the US. But I'm sure, like everybody else, it's sort of touch and go right now based on the current wave we're in. So.
Yeah, I guess there's some hope on the horizon here for this finally getting past, but we shall see. So that puts us in, okay, so for the US, you're thinking April. So that puts us at a year, basically, of this, right? Which is
13
wild.
months. Almost 13 months for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the things we talked about a lot when we last spoke was, keeping everybody motivated. And you talked about some of the things that you all had implemented, some daily stand-ups, lots of Slack, making sure to stay tight on coaching and one-on-ones and all of those things. So as things have dragged on, and as they will continue to drag on for a while yet, have you had to change anything? What are you doing to keep people engaged? We get a little bit of false hope here and there, and it feels like maybe we're over it, then it comes back, and it's a drag for people. What are you guys doing to combat that?
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about last time was we had originally it was a Q&A around COVID. Our CEO would host every week. We've pivoted that to just a general company town hall that we do every 2 weeks. Obviously not focused on COVID, but a different topic. We've had each of the different, leaders in the company come in and talk a little bit about their team and make everyone aware of the things that they're focused on, just to help broaden communication about initiatives. So that was good. We just, in our last one, just did our 2021 OKR rollout, which was great. Give the team focus on what we're doing next year and what our initiatives are. On my team, what we've tried to pivot to is, we used to have like a Monday is pipeline, Tuesday is this, Wednesday is that, sort of very regimented. And we've learned that it was just getting kind of rote. So we've kind of mixed it up a little bit. I have a couple different, formats we've been using. One of my favorite ones is just, great moment of the week. We usually do it on Thursday or Friday, go around the table. Everyone talks about a good call or a good demo or a nice surprise they had in their week. Been trying to also mix in random content from the outside. Last weekend, I found a really good 30-minute YouTube from a conference a couple years ago, like a SaaS, a prospecting guru guy. They had a really good talk track, a little bit lewd, a couple F-bombs, but maybe a lot of F-bombs. But sent that out, challenged the team to listen to it,
Right.
come to the meeting with thoughts on it. Just, a little bit of sort of creative stimulation and out of the norm, not just the same stuff all the time. I think that's where it starts to get pretty boring. And then the other part of it is just not just hearing the talking boxes of me and the director or the manager talking all the time. Like, get it to two-way communication, get people adding into it, and also being kind of vet out where they're struggling. So,
All right.
as we've been doing.
Yeah, I've I've definitely seen the little bit of Groundhog Day kind of feel that we're getting into, right? It's just, you get up, you roll into your home office, you go make your calls, you do your things. It definitely is tough to break up that monotony. Yeah, how do you like, so this is like a super tactical question, but I am curious, when you get in these Zoom meetings and you've got 20 people or whatever, it's really hard to even get people to speak up, right? Because it's just interruptive or whatever. Like, how do you really try to ensure that people do feel like that two-way communication is happening?
Yeah, I mean, that's to the point I made a minute ago about like calling on people to contribute or making them do something that they have to go read and come prepared with some ideas, because it's so easy to be just the lump on the log in these Zooms and just kind of check out. We had a call the other day on Tuesday where I'd asked folks to do something on the call on Monday and some of the people didn't do it. And I was like, kind of getting on people, and they're like, well, when did you tell us to do that? That's like, yesterday on the Zoom, remember?
Right, right.
So, it's pretty obvious that, you know, people can get sort of complacent, especially when you're doing them first thing in the morning. People are still getting their coffee in them and still waking up. I get it. So I think the biggest lesson I've had is it's got to be interactive. It can't just be about the message you care about as a leader. And, you got to pivot it to things they want to hear about. And sometimes it's just got to be the bitch session. What's hard, what's broken, what's kicking your ass. Like, they don't get to vent. There's no water cooler venting right now or coffee machine venting. So, let them vent once in a while and let them have their say about what they're pissed about. Because, there's things, nothing's perfect, right? We all know that.
Yeah.
So, and don't try to just, defend everything or explain everything. Just sometimes just let them run, let them say what they got to say. So.
That makes sense. So, it's not only internal, right? Our customers and prospects and folks we're talking to are dealing with this, like all the same stuff you just talked about. They're dealing with that in their own companies and everything. And so I'm curious, we're 2 quarters in, we're about to close out, the third pandemic quarter here. And also, closing out the year, which is, I'm guessing probably a pretty big quarter for you guys. You know, have you noticed anything different about how customers are responding, how prospects are responding? Are there tactics that used to work that don't work? Are there are there things that are different about the life cycle and the way that you got to engage with customers now?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a pretty common thing that our board is always asking us. Are we seeing the deal cycle extend? Are we seeing customers be less responsive? I mean, fortunately for us, our deal cycles have remained relatively consistent. We did see a little bit of slowdown in deal movement in November, and I think it's mostly because I kind of believe a lot of people just checked their brain out for the holiday, and it was a super short month. But we haven't seen a tremendous amount of change. I say the one thing that we've seen that's the hardest is just when you're doing a deal that's got a lot of pieces like, legal and finance and all the different internal coordinations, the bigger companies have really struggled to be effective at it, just because they're not efficient at working remotely as opposed to in an office. So I feel like the larger deals with big fat companies, we really had to kind of manhandle every step
Right.
because they kind of get stuck waiting on each other. We had a deal with a very large Japanese computer company that we closed December 1st that should have closed November 30th. And it didn't for that exact reason. And it was pretty frustrating, actually kind of pissed me off, honestly. But at the end of the day, it just came down to, coordination on their side and them not being as nimble as we are. And so I keep reminding my team, like, you have to be a lot more deliberate and a lot more questioning of, okay, what's the next step? Who's that? How do they find out about it? And it's a little bit kind of annoying to be that way because it's like creating the checklist for the customer.
Right.
But to a certain extent, if you don't ask, you see these deals, especially these larger companies, just kind of sitting for days and days and not moving because it's waiting on someone who doesn't, is just processing things in sequential order versus prioritizing stuff. But
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so in some ways, I mean, that's always been the case with these complex deals where you got a bunch of moving pieces and these big companies don't necessarily want to match your pace. um,
Yeah, for
but
sure. Yeah, I think
but
the difference though, like, in days of old, like we did close a large deal last month where the company was actually in office and it was sitting on someone's desk, and the guy that was our signer was like, "I'll run down the hall and yell at so and so to sign it," and
mhm,
that's great. Unfortunately, there's not many companies that are in the
right,
office, so that notion of being able to walk across the hall and ask this other person to do this step, your sponsor can usually do that. Those are
right.
now been pushed back into email queues, and so that's definitely for sure been a challenge for us.
Okay, yeah, yeah, I get that. Um, another super tactical thing, but something that I've been interested in, you mentioned a little bit ago about how we're all just kind of boxes on a screen now in these, in these
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah.
Have you seen the way that customers and prospects want to interact with your reps different at all? I mean, are people more or less inclined to use video, to have Zoom conversations like this one, or is it like, has that changed at all? I know when I've seen it in the past before this, right? There's always a mix. Some people wanted to do video and were happy with it. Lots of people didn't. Is that any different now?
Yeah, I would say that from what I've seen, more people are inclined to it just
Mhm.
because they miss the interaction with another human.
Right.
And so it's rare that I'm on a call with a third, external party where they're not on the screen,
Mhm.
which is kind of nice and refreshing. I can remember when we were working together in the past, you'd go around the sales floor, and a lot of times the rep would be the one on the video, and it'd be the silhouette on the other side.
Mhm.
So it's been good to see more people jumping on these calls, and everyone's got their new cool Zoom backdrop, the beach or whatever they've got,
Right.
right? And whenever they download it off the internet, there's probably, hopefully not some type of a bot script or something,
Right.
but yeah, so I haven't seen it. I've seen it go in the positive direction.
Mhm.
It's interesting though. There are certain personalities, especially we do sell into some technical folks, and some of our technical personas tend to be the ones that are a little more kind of shy, if you will, and will be on silhouette mode, or
Mhm.
no visual. So that's always interesting. I'm trying to encourage them to come face to face so you can read their body language a little better. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think, yeah, I've been trying to decide. And so I'm asking folks this because I'm trying to decide if it's just me. Like my assumption now is kind of default to video, right? Like I find it a little bit odd if somebody doesn't want to do video, or they're like, well, let's just have a phone call, not a Zoom or something like that. And I'm trying to decide if maybe I'm the weird one, or if they're the weird one. I don't know. So
or they're just still in their pajamas, or they don't want you to see they haven't combed their hair this week. So
right. I guess, I suppose everybody should always get the chance to opt out. So
yeah, fair enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned this earlier, and so I wanted to dig into this a little bit. Obviously, coming up to the end of the year, crazy year. So I imagine you've probably been spending a lot of your time thinking about 2021, doing goal setting, comp planning, that kind of thing. So what are your big areas of focus for 2021? What are you guys looking to do? What are, any changes you're looking to make? What's on your mind for next year?
Yeah, another big growth year. We've been fortunate to grow this year and hire some good team members and new team members. Continuing on that path for 2021, more growth, adding more folks to all aspects of my team, reps, CSMs, SDRs, SEs. So that's a big thing, obviously. And with that is figuring out a way to bring people on more effectively so they can get up to speed quicker.
Mhm.
So maybe revamping not only our training process and dedicating someone full on to enablement, but also getting a little bit more use case or specific about our pitch cycle
Mhm.
so that it's not just one pitch for all, but looking at the different types of companies we sell to and the scenarios we solve for, and being a little bit more prescriptive about how to approach that sale, because we know they're a e-commerce company or whatever their specialization is. So that's a big focus. Working with you, obviously, on being a little bit more prescriptive about a more sophisticated lead rotation, because that's a big problem for us, is to get it to be more balanced and equitable across the team. That's another really big focus. Those are some of the big ones that stand out. I think, overall, we're rounding out Europe to be more on par and scale with the US team.
Mhm.
So obviously hiring people in different parts of Europe, different countries, and then training them remotely. We have a couple new leaders in the business that have come on recently. So getting them up to speed on the company and the team and how to manage while being remote. So similar to what I went through. So got that to get through. So that's fun. And
Right.
yeah, I'd say those are the big things that kind of stand out for us. We have a new COO who came in, who's been putting a lot of great processes in place. We're going to roll out OKR. We've rolled out OKRs for the first time, which you and I did together our last company. So that's been fun to put in place. And we took the company through it earlier this week, or earlier last week, I should say. And that was great to show them the big picture objectives that we all have as department heads and how they all tie together. So excited to see that as a guiding focus for us as a company for 21.
Cool. So a couple of things I wanted to pick up on in what you just said for 2021. You talked about hiring, onboarding, enablement, those areas and doing all that remotely. A lot of our earlier conversation, we're talking about keeping people engaged, but, it's a whole other ball game when you're getting somebody ramped, right? You're just getting them onboarded, you're getting them started, you're doing enablement. How have you all had to change your onboarding and your enablement approach to deal with the current reality?
Yeah, it's been definitely challenging. The days of putting people in a room with experts and white paper or whiteboards and stuff, that's no longer the case. So we actually built out a 15-day per script, day by day course, courses, self-learning focus, and include some sessions with experts, some sessions with listening to calls from Chorus, other sessions of go read this part of our product and answer these questions. So it's a mix of self-guided, and then also listening of recordings and then having experts present to you. But the biggest thing we've done is they're like within the first 3 days, they're working on part of the playback. So like on the third day of our first week, we have them trying to work on their first part of their pitch deck, like their discovery call. Because I feel like you got to get them engaged and get them doing something quick, because if it's 7 days of read, study, listen, the fire hose effect kicks in and they're just, they're washed out. So we've changed it to be interactive earlier, and a little bit of quiz aspect, a little bit of, record yourself doing the 30-second elevator pitch, record yourself doing the discovery call, put them up. And then we're getting on as a leadership team, listening with them, critiquing, giving them feedback, making them I can do it again. It's a huge time investment for us. We do a daily 15-minute when we have a new hire in training, end of day wrap up, 15 minutes, as many of the leaders that can jump on as we can do, check their pulse, make sure they don't have any obstacles, help them out, and did every session go as planned? Did every presenter show up? Those kinds of things. We're having to be super hands-on, and it's worked. We hired 3 reps in August and 2 reps in November, and all of them have deals on the board already, which I'm super proud of, which is a good sign that the model's working. At least, in early signs say it's working, but it's just time investment. You can't just put them in a room with a bunch of stuff and go, hey, go study. This is not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that as just yet another example of the luxury that we don't have anymore of just getting everybody in a room. But this is another example, I think, where it is kind of reinforcing some best practices, right? Get people to get some reps in early, get people to play things back to you early, right? And so we're having to, in some ways, I think that this being separated thing has gotten us to focus on the real basics of what we have to do, and we can't kind of get lazy and say, well, we'll just throw them in a room and folks can just kind of figure it out, or they can walk the floor and listen to the senior rep or whatever. You've got to be really intentional about how you actually get them going, and I think that's in some ways maybe that carries forward in the future, and we get a little bit better at some of this stuff, even when it gets easy.
I can't remember a time where we had an onboarding of a new hire and I would get on a call with them every day for 5 or 10 minutes, right? So I think the good thing for me at my level is It's getting me, to spend more time with the new hires early, understand where the warning signs of where we're dropping balls on helping them get up to speed. And, are they still trying to figure out how to use their security key on their Mac? Like,
Right.
is there something like that that's trivial that's screwing them up, right? And we're being deliberate about it. We're like, I want you to be super critical about everything that happened today. And if one of the presenters sucked, I want to hear about it, because we need to go calibrate them, right? This has to be good for you, because this is all you're getting for 15 days. So you don't get to sit in the office and just barge calls all day and walk around and shadow demos. That luxury isn't there. So,
Right.
but it's definitely proven to me, like, having a library of good calls from Chorus that represent, good things and bad things, and having that at your fingertips is just tremendously valuable. We're very fortunate that we had a lot of good tools here before this whole thing started, because we've been able to leverage them to our benefit. So
Cool. All right, I want to really just switch gears here, because there's something that that you and I have talked a lot about over time, and also that I'm certainly paying a lot of attention to myself when I think about the future of how revenue teams get structured, and that's one of this idea of how we structure our teams around territories, how we manage our books for our reps. Like these are all a lot of components that I think get kind of overlooked. Not overlooked because it's something we spend a ton of time on, but I think we sort of just have this received wisdom of, oh, we're going to set things up with geographic territories. Everybody's going to get a batch of accounts, and that's just how we're going to do things. Whereas another example of the pandemic maybe crystallizing some best practices or lack thereof, suddenly we're all inside sales. We've got this opportunity now where we can figure out if there's more optimal ways of doing this. And so one of the things that I think you've always done a really interesting job of is this idea of building dynamic books for reps, where reps have a book of accounts that they're responsible for, but it's not just a bunch of static named accounts or a static geographic territory. It's this dynamic book where accounts are moving in, they work accounts to a completion, accounts move out, and usually built around some kind of metric that you're trying to optimize for with the structure of the book. So I was wondering if you could take us through sort of your thought process about how you build these kinds of dynamic books.
Sure.
And then I know we've talked in the past a little bit about some, an approach that you're taking at Mailgun that I thought was really interesting. I was hoping you could share that as well.
Sure. So I got sort of spun up on this idea 2 companies ago. I was at a company that sold specifically to IT brands that spend a lot of money on advertising. And we had a TAM that was pretty small. It was about 5,000 companies in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And in the early days when we had 7 or 8 reps, it was fine. But as we grew the company and we had 100 reps, all of a sudden we just had a major TAM to rep problem. And we end up with these micro books of, a high-end rep would have like 40 accounts.
Right.
A lower end rep would have like 70 or 80, but there just wasn't enough out there to sell to. And so we came up with a model there of estimating what we thought their spend could be in total, and then basically building the book based on a ratio of quota to spend potential. So that was the first incarnation of this that I did, and that was at Spiceworks. When I went over to Junkite, obviously the TAM was quite a bit harder.
Let me drill into that just a little bit. I want to make sure I understand. So the idea is you started out with maybe a more traditional model of like named accounts or something like that folks had. And then you moved into this idea of, okay, we have this well-defined TAM. We can estimate what we think the spend potential is of each one of these 5 accounts or thereabouts. And then we can try to load up the books of the reps based on some ratio of that spend potential and their quota capacity. Is that right? I'm thinking about that. Okay.
Yeah, but we got to the point where we had so little resources to work with. It was sort of like rationing. It was like war rationing of accounts. I mean, that's a terrible analogy, but I mean, it was such a difficult thing because we kind of had to ration every little piece of out, right? And so that was exactly what we were doing. Was we were basically engineering to like I think we did a 7 or 8 times multiple of quota to book potential, right? Okay. And of course, the reps would argue with us about the algorithm of the book value, the quota account value. at some point it was like, look, you can argue with me, but this is what it's going to be.
Sure.
And so, it
Right.
was a little bit of fuzzy logic. I mean, it was based off their public filings and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
that one was the most obtuse because it wasn't really grounded on anything mathematical or the reps could get their hands around. When we moved over to Trendkite, we had a much larger TAM, which was great. And we had done some predictive modeling that kind of figured out industries that were good for us. And we had sold enough customers when I got there that we had a rough idea of average deal size for a university versus, a tech company versus a travel company. And
Mhm.
so we had about 6 marquee industries we focused on. And so we built an account score that allowed us to grade the accounts. And then we came up with a scheme that we gave the reps, their canonical book of 100 prospect accounts divided across different spend bands. So again, the same concept of a multiple of book value to quota, but in this scenario, since we had a large TAM, basically it was a transient book of 80 that once they worked it to completion, they could essentially, we called it reap it out and get it out of their book and replace it with another one. So you would see, a good amount of movement through the account base. You'd have 3 to 5% of the account base moving every couple of days out of their book as they, figured out the customer was in a contract or not interested or not a great fit, whatever the scenario was. So that it was a really interesting model, and we definitely got a great improvement in selling in the ASP because we started to really understand which accounts and which account scores would drive the best sale price for us on the product. So
I want to talk about the dynamic aspect here. We talk about the accounts kind of moving, and so the way we did it, obviously, or you and I know because we were both involved in it, right? But one of the key things about the way we did it was that there was this constant allocation into the reps books from a sort of the central pool of accounts that weren't being worked, so that sort of each rep had an input from um, you know that central pool, and that was managed, and then also from inbounds, right, depending on how that flowed. And so one of the things that I thought was pretty cool about the system that you put together there was um, a lot of folks, when we talk about this idea of these kind of these books, they're like, well, so what are you trying to do, balance just like an average score in the book or something like that? And you had a little bit of a different model that you applied there with this idea of blends. Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah, for sure. I mean, so the original idea of the blends came from the different sales cycles based on the type of deal. So our lower end score deals would typically close faster. They had a lower ASP, but they would move through the funnel faster. Our 90 to 100s were typically a really high ASP, but they would typically take 90 days. We were running monthly quotas. So the idea was basically give the reps, slots, if you will, of 10 accounts in the 1 to 10 score, 10 accounts in the 20 to 30, so that you were essentially engineering a reasonable distribution of accounts that can close quick and accounts that will take 90 or 100 days, so that you could keep that monthly momentum because we were running, monthly quotas. So that allowed for a couple of things. Obviously, the balance of deal closing, but also it ensured that you weren't giving GE to like the brand new rep on the floor because it was a 90 plus. So
Right.
that's going to end up in a higher ranked strategic AE's book. So that helped as well with making sure the right accounts went to the right skill level and right tenured people.
So one of the themes that I'm hearing across both of these instances, right, is really trying to think about segmenting the accounts by potential value, right? Not some arbitrary thing like where their headquarters are, for example, or exactly
Yes.
what industry they're in, something like that. And so it does sound like that's a super core component of this, because if you're going to try to figure out some way to compare a book of a book A with this many accounts in it to book B with this many accounts in it, you kind of got to have a score or a number or something that allows you to sort of combine those and figure out what's what,
Yeah.
so that you can keep things balanced. And so you talked about sort of two different ways of doing that. One that sounded like it might be a little bit of little bit of space math that you were doing in the the 5,000 account TAM, right?
Yeah.
Based on some
Version just
estimate
had
of
to
spend, right?
solve.
And then another one that was a different kind of space math about sort of the the algorithmic approach. I mean, what if somebody were to think about doing this and say like, look, we're struggling with geographic segmentation or named accounts or something like that. We want to go to this idea of segmenting on account value. How would you recommend somebody get started, right? Because I think this big barrier to entry of saying like, I don't know how to value this book of accounts is a big issue for
Yeah.
people.
I think the first thing is good data overlay, right? So whether you're using a tool like Clearbit or DataFox or DMB, whatever you like for data attribution, but attributing your accounts with good firmographic data that can help you then break them down. So as you look at the ones you have sold to, what are their characteristics? Are they, certain industries, certain company sizes, certain parts of the world? Where do they lie? First thing you have to do to be able to kind of take this approach. And then you can run, regressions on that to understand how they fall out, where the patterns are. Do you generally sell 3 times more of this ASP in this industry versus that? And that will inform you really heavily on how to architect it and how to design it. And then from there, you can back into the book distribution based on how many, like, for example, if universities are a great space for you, go into your total prospect base. How many universities do you have? How many can you apply out in a rep's book at a certain amount of time, at a certain point in time? And then, to that example, universities only typically buy in the summer months, right? As their budgets clear. So usually Q3. Or depending on whether they're public or private, but those dynamics then tell you when those accounts should be in play. And like a university account should not be sitting in someone's account book all year long because they don't buy all year.
Right.
So those things start to really factor into when you rest the accounts and when you have them distributed versus having them parked in someone's name all year, just wasting away. Arguably sending prospecting emails to universities in November and December is not worth your time. Put them in a recycle sequence with marketing, right? So
Right.
these things, as you get more sophisticated, they can really inform you on when's a good time to have those accounts in play, how long should they rest, and when they're resting, who should be nurturing them and what kind of content should you use to nurture them with.
And I think that concept of an account being, at rest versus being active is not a lot of, I don't hear people use that kind of language a lot. It might be sort of implicit, I think, in the way that some people think about it. But, I've certainly talked with a lot of folks who, are running pretty large sales organizations who talk about how their reps just sit on several hundred leads or something like that are just like kind of sitting there in their name, and then periodically sales ops goes in and they treat it like just cleaning out some weeds or something like that, when in reality that's you're talking about your TAM. You're talking about the definition of the folks that you could be selling to, right? And in fact, not just your SAM. These are the people that sales addressable, right? And so I think getting smart about that life cycle and realizing that account life cycle isn't just a linear thing of engage and then either I close or I don't close is super important to this. And so, getting down to the mechanics of that, I want to just kind of clarify. I mean, the idea here is that there's, you try to model the world in the sense that there's all these accounts in your CRM, whatever that is, that sort of represent everybody you can sell to, and some of those are sitting under a house user or something, just kind of resting, and you're not necessarily doing anything, and then periodically those flow back into reps based on either time or some other criteria. And so I think that idea of on again, off again cycles that you're doing with these accounts is super important, and goes back to what you were saying before about you've got that 5,000 account TAM, right? Like you can't just let something just disappear or just like fall off the face of the earth, right? Because then that's like actually a significant percentage of what future revenue might be. So it's important to really manage that.
You can't burn it, right? You can't burn it. So that's the other part. Like if you keep one of those accounts in somebody's name and they're sending email every week to the same person, like Why aren't you responding to me? Are you stuck
Right.
under an elephant? You know, all these crazy things we get, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's
Just
like,
reply
at some
one
point
or two or three to this email.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
I'm in a death trap. You know, you're going to piss these people off. And so there, I mean, there's a rep right now from a software product for salespeople has been chasing me incessantly for 6 months. And I appreciate his tenacity, but to a certain degree, I am like pretty burnt on them now because I think I nicely told them I'm not buying this year because last year my budget's burned out, and I won't be relooking at it till Q2 of 2021. But yet he's calling me every other week. And I'm like, you're wasting your time. And so take the signals, put me in your rest cycle, get back to me, date on me for, Q1 of 2021 and give me a rest, dude. Like, I don't want any more voicemails from you. I know there's an old school mentality, like eventually you're going to answer. Right. Yeah, I might answer and tell you to hell because I already told you not to call me the next year, right? So,
yeah.
So I think, and to the other side of the equation, the rep gets more and more frustrated every time they dial that person, thinking this is hopeless, they're never going to pick up, and they get more, kind of angry with that prospect, right? And I think it's like a bad girlfriend. Sometimes you just got to break up and go away from each other for a little while, or bad, boyfriend, whatever.
Just need a little space.
Sometimes you just got to need space. Yeah. So you got to break up with those prospects that just aren't ready for you. So
right.
So I think that part of the transient nature of recycling the accounts, running them through a good sequence, be it 21 days, be it 45 days, whatever makes sense in your model. If you get an outcome like, hey, we're not ready to next year, great, put them in the refresh and they get back to me for next year. Or if you don't get a contact after that period of time, put it in rest, let it sit for 60 to 90 days, and then bring it back around. They need a break from you as much as you need a break from chasing them because you're angry at chasing them, right? So I think it's a healthy thing.
And I think about, it's really a two-dimensional thing. One dimension is the firmographic fit, right? Are they actually part of your, ideal customer profile? And then the other dimension is the timing. You mentioned about, universities only buying in certain periods. I mean, same thing with federal government, same thing with, just individual companies like Mailgun, right? You've spent your budget for this year. You talk to me again later, right? That kind of thing. And so really trying to get the best accounts on both of those dimensions in the right place, in the right time, in the hands of the right rep is super important. And that's got to be driven by your own internal processes, and not just you can't just drive it by inbounds, because clearly that's a great signal from an inbound, but it's not necessarily going to be, the exact right time or the exact right person. And so you've got to kind of have both of those things going at all times to make sure that you're pulling accounts that are ready out of the pool, making sure they're allocated, making sure people are working them at the right time. That's So I think this model makes a lot of sense, especially in this world going forward, where we're trying to manage, especially in B2B SaaS. You tend to have these like decent sized TAMs, right? In many cases, you've got a fair number of accounts that you've got to work through. But not so many you can just waste them, right? So these types of models are I think efficient in the sense that you're spending the energy when it needs to be spent, where it needs to be spent effectively, while at the same time not wasting accounts or blowing through accounts or burning accounts and then making them unusable in the future because you pissed everybody off. So it's seems like the model of the future.
I like the concept of give the rep the reward for mining and getting the information. So if they figure out that the budget's up, for refresh next year Q3, and they get the account back, at that point for finding that information and marking it, it gives them a reward to do a better job in the cold call to figure out why they're not interested. So often, people get the person on the phone, they get shut down right away, and they just kind of walk away, as opposed to having a motivation to figure out why they're being shut down. And if they know that they can rest that account and get it back and have a reason to call in 3 months or 3 quarters, whatever it is, that's going to be connectable, or the person's hopefully going to connect back to that comment. That's a reward for them for being a good prospector and getting a little bit of information out of that call, right? Otherwise, the no feels a lot more painful when there's nothing to get value out of it, right? At least if the no is, hey, it's not right now, but I have a chance to play later. It's much more meaningful. And then, as you do these over time, like at Trinkite, they'd been doing it for a while. We got to the point where we had a fair percentage of our prospect base marked with their install or their renewal dates. And we were getting really good at putting the accounts out at the right time. And it really drove connect rates up and drove engagement rates for demos a lot higher because we were calling them at the right time and we weren't annoying the hell out of them. I think a lot of that is if you're paying attention and calling them when they want to be called, then it's relevant. Clearly a lot better experience for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so, you talked about your previous two experiences and we kind of got in the weeds there on a whole bunch of different components of that, but, are there any tweaks to that model or anything that you're bringing to Mailgun that kind of refines some of those concepts?
Yeah, at this company, we have the benefit of having a much more accurate way to measure what we think the spend potential is for an account. So we're able to kind of segment the accounts based on their spending ability. And so that bucketing of the account score from, buckets of 10 with 0 to 100, we're able to do that a little bit more sophisticated based on the spend potential, which is really nice. And then that informs the way we build the books based on the tenure of the rep. So, the AE1s, our brand new reps, get kind of a lower end, if you will, the smaller ASP. As they move up, they get a bigger, higher end blend. But we're keeping every rep with even my most tenured reps still have a decent number of transactional or smaller SP accounts in their name just to keep velocity up. Because if you're working on all 90 to 120 day sales cycles, it kind of breaks you when you've got monthly quotas. So, right. I mean, being in still a bit of a velocity SaaS business, we're trying to keep a good mix of quickly closing accounts, 45 to 60 days in everybody's book so that they get those wins when they're working on a huge 6-figure, 120, 150 day sales cycle.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an underrated part of the rev psychology in these in I'll say higher velocity SaaS, right? Is that reps a lot of times when you talk to them, right, like they're hungry for that 6-figure deal, right? They want to prove themselves with that kind of deal, but a lot of reps aren't necessarily really prepared to sit there and have everything be dry for 6 months until they close like a huge deal. That's much more of there are reps with an enterprise sales mentality who can be happy doing that and make a bunch of money doing that and all of that, but usually that's not your kind of archetypical like high velocity SaaS type rep. And so building the books in a way that gives them an opportunity to hit some singles and doubles while they're trying to line up like, that big shot makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. I mean, I think psychologically, everyone wants to get a win and be on the board and contribute to the goal every month. And not having 6 or 7 out of 10, on the board versus 3 or 4, it's just better for all overall morale. So,
Right.
So definitely believe that. And I think also the quick deals keep you sharp. You can make mistakes on the longer deals and correct them because there's more time. The short deals are where you have to be pretty on your game and you get tested to be accurate on every step. So I think it's definitely a finesse in keeping your skills sharp by keeping those quick turn, fast moving deals in everyone's book.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. So I ask you, I want to wrap up here by asking you a question that I asked you last time. I asked you about, we were 6 months in and I said, okay, what are we seeing that's going to be, still impacting us 6 years from now, right? And so I'm curious, when you think about like looking forward to April, right? We'll have been in this 12, 13 months, right? Clearly there's going to be some long-term impact and long-term changes to the way people do business, I think clearly. So what do you think that we'll take away from this time that will change how we do business over the next 5 years?
Good question. I think for sales schemes specifically,
Mhm.
people will believe that you won't have in a big giant sales floor or in pods and with TVs in front of them glowing their numbers. I think people will realize that if you set people up the right way and you give them the right tools to be successful, they don't have to necessarily be in that structure. That's probably one of the biggest things. I also think, to the point you made earlier, it's going to really change how we teach and onboard employees
Mhm.
to be more self-sufficient. I mean, I can think back to being in Salesforce and being able to see people struggling on a call and just running over and throwing the lifesaver to save them, right? And that doesn't happen now. Like
Right.
there's probably calls going on all day right now that I don't know about, where people are struggling, and so having to put mechanisms in place to get a better sense of when those things are happening, so that you can go coach those people after the fact. I think that's one of the biggest things. You don't get those signals that you normally get being around people in the same sales floor all day long. So being able to know that the calls that went well and the calls that didn't go well, and being able to help them, I think that's a big change. Like, we've been fortunate. We had Chorus here and really well instrumented. I think for the people that didn't have it or didn't have Gong or whichever tool you like, Exec Vision, they're going to have to go build those things out quickly to better sense when things are going wrong in the business that they don't see anymore.
And I think, I mean, that to me is another example of how, in many ways, we're just sort of reinforcing what were probably best practices anyway, right? I mean, that kind of throwing somebody a lifesaver running across the floor kind of thing, I mean, you're in a meeting, you can't do that, right? Like,
Yeah,
even when we were
right.
all on the same floor. So it's sort of, you got to rely on their managers to be able to keep close eyes on their folks and coach their folks and make sure that they're seeing those things. And you got to rely on the ability to discover those things after the fact and build the systems that let you see that behavior and correct that behavior, because frankly, it was easier when you happened to be walking the floor, but you were walking the floor all the time, right? So, and now you're walking the floor none of the time. So
I just walk in circles here now. So
just wear out a track, just
we're gonna have to
going
put
through.
in new wood floors when this is over.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, even though that sounds like really great, but it's not possible to. I mean, you can have 4 or 5 demos running, in parallel. So
Mhm.
even if you have trying to have managers listening in and jumping in on calls, it's not plausible. It's not scalable, especially with most people running 7, 8, 9 to 1. So instrumenting, your call tracking tools to give you those warning flags of which calls you need to go back and debrief on and coach on. And it's going to be a big change in how we do things, I think. And obviously it goes back to onboarding as well. But I mean, I'll be really interested to see, which companies will go back and which companies will say, we're going to allow flexible working. That was always a big thing for us was, reps would like, hey, if I hit my quota, can I have 2 days work from home? And, we just didn't do it because it was too hard to make it consistent and fair. And it'll be really interesting to see how companies handle that going forward in terms of work from home or work flex work and things like that. For me, we've hired a bunch of reps here now in Austin, where I am, headquarters in San Antonio. We have half the team there, and now I've got a set of folks here, but we don't have an office here. So what will we do? Will we, meet one day a week at a kind of a WeWork kind of place, or will we hang out on my deck, or I don't know. We don't know yet. So,
Right.
yeah.
Just
So that's one of
bring
the big
people
things.
over and have them go out on the boat for a little while, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure my wife would be super keen about that. So,
All right. Well,
yeah.
I really appreciate the time. I mean, this was we covered a lot of ground here, from the pandemic all the way to the nuts and bolts of doing these dynamic books. So appreciate all the time. And if you want to sounds like you're hiring quite a bit. So if folks are interested in Mailgun, what should they do?
Yeah. So just go to our website. We got a jobs board on there, like everybody. Right now we've got SDR roles, SE, AE, CSM, which is our account manager, install-based account manager. And then in the company in large, we've got a lot of roles as well, like developers, other aspects. So tons of jobs out there. I think we have like 30 or 40 heads to hire in QA
Wow.
or some crazy number like that. I'm glad I'm not one of the recruiters. It's a stressful number. But yeah, a lot of good opportunities with us. So go to the mailgun.com and check out the job section and let us know. Hopefully you found something good.
Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Kevin, and have a happy holidays.
Yeah, man. Take care, guys.
All right.